Hi, you're listening to the Stefan Livera podcast, a show about Bitcoin and Austrian economics. Today, episode 143 with Eduardo Gomez, head of customer support at Purse.io. We talk about Bitcoin as a source of truth in Venezuela. So first, this podcast is brought to you by Kraken Exchange, one of the world's leading and longest standing Bitcoin exchanges. Consistently rated the best, they've got a high quality platform offering some of the best liquidity in the industry. They've got high trading volume and low fees with no minimum or hidden fees. Kraken have 24/7 support. They also offer an OTC desk for those seeking higher touch large block trades. They offer Kraken Pro mobile app. Kraken Pro delivers all the security and features you love about the Kraken Exchange in a beautiful mobile-first design for advanced trading on the go. Kraken also offer Kraken Margin up to 5 times and Futures up to 50 times. And also, if you haven't already, you must check out Crypto Watch platform. Crypto Watch is a charting and trading terminal for Bitcoin markets, providing one powerful interface to scan prices, analyze market movements, and make trades on every major exchange. Go to kraken.com. This episode also presented to you by Unchained Capital, a Bitcoin financial services company providing services built on the foundation of multi-signature. Unchained offer a 2 of 3 multi-signature vault. You can use Trezor or Ledger. There's a web interface, and Coldcard is coming soon as well, actually. And these are a great option if you're thinking through how best to secure your Bitcoin for the long term. And then, if you need to access USD liquidity, but you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, Unchained offer collateralized loans. So you can put up some Bitcoin, it's stored on chain, dedicated multi-sig addresses, and it's never rehypothecated. They're continually iterating on the product, and you can see that with Caravan and an external spend workflow. Go and look them up at unchained-capital.com. Next, check out givebitcoin.io, the easiest and safest way to get your friends and family into Bitcoin. Take it from me, I've given Bitcoin to people before and they lost it. They didn't know what they were receiving. That's why there's value in Give Bitcoin. You can buy Bitcoin for your friends and family with just an email address, and that gift is time-locked with a regulated US custodian for 1 year. During that time, Give Bitcoin is delivering monthly lessons to that recipient. And there's a lot of well-known Bitcoiners involved, such as Safedine, Matt Odell, Citizen Bitcoin, Jan Pritzker, and others. I'm also an advisor with a small equity stake, assisting with the curriculum. You can also get Bitcoin, and there's a new product coming called Save Bitcoin under the overarching brand of Swan. So make sure you keep an eye out and check them out at givebitcoin.io. Have you got a hardware wallet, and have you backed up your seed? Check out CipherSafe at cyphersafe.io, producing the Cypher Wheel product. If you've got a BIP39 seed, right, like your Coldcard, Trezor, Ledger, is it backed up in a way that's fireproof, waterproof, rustproof, petproof, and tamper-evident? The Cypher Wheel masks the words of your seed, and it's got a padlock tamper-evident seal, so you know if it's been opened. CipherSafe are also working on the stainless steel alloy used to provide more corrosion resistance, and otherwise the product scored an A versus heat and crushing on Jameson Lobb's recent round of physical seed testing. So make sure you or your loved ones have access to Bitcoins if an accident occurs. Orders should be going out in early February. Go and order yours at cyphersafe.io. One interesting theme that came out to me from this discussion was the use of Bitcoin as a source of truth in determining a better exchange rate for people wanting to send money back home. We also talk about the Petro, we talk about stablecoins, what's needed in terms of tooling and education, and also we touch on Bitcoin in Argentina. Here is the interview. Eduardo, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. It's an honor to be here.
So, look, Eduardo, I know you've got an interesting story to tell us. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you first got into all this?
Sure. So basically, I dipped my toes into the technology back in 2012. That's when I first heard about Bitcoin. I was a freshman in college. Basically, I was looking for something to, maybe earn a side income. So I started mining Bitcoin with my GPU. It was still a thing back then. A Bitcoin was worth around maybe anywhere between $6 to $12. My mom had just gifted me a GPU, a good GPU, a good video card. So I started mining the thing, and I installed my first Bitcoin wallet, which was Electrum, and it was a fun experience. Unfortunately, I stopped maybe week, 1 or 2 weeks into the mining, the mining thing. Mostly because I was so afraid of burning my GPU that I had to stop, unfortunately. So that's why I'm not like a millionaire right now. It's pretty much because I was scared of burning my GPU. It's always a fun it's always a fun story to tell.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And so
so
you grew up in Venezuela, right?
I grew up in Venezuela. I was starting college. I was studying something very equivalent to computer science. Um, and so that was my first experience with Bitcoin, or my Bitcoin baptism, if you will. Um, but then, yeah, I stopped mining the thing, and I pretty much forgot about it up until 2015. In 2015, I was 3 years into college. I was looking for maybe an outlet, because my country's currency was devaluating at such a high rate, high pace. The country was entering economic turmoil. The price of oil was plummeting, and that's when everything went downhill for Venezuelan citizens. I mean, you could see the signs that the economy was going to turn bad back in 2012. Our country has been under a currency control regime since 2002. So essentially, everyone was unable to purchase foreign currency, unable to purchase things like the dollar or the euro or anything. So when you pair a currency or capital control restriction, um, with a government that is increasingly spending more money that it can, basically running deficitary economic policies, the result is that everyone loses, because inflation goes up, the currency keeps devaluating at a higher rate. So basically, everyone was getting poorer by the minute, and it was a very sad thing to see. Um, uh, my mom was a nurse, and she was working 2 jobs, and back in 2015, her her wage was pretty much um, something like $20 per month, working 2 jobs, which is insane, right? Um, and I started, I rediscovered Bitcoin because I was talking with a friend, and he said that he was hearing about Bitcoin, and that's when my mind clicking. Hey, yeah, I remember Bitcoin. I think I have some stored uh, in a seed somewhere in a wallet, and that's when my mind clicked, and I started to look at the potential of this technology to solve many things in my life. I started That year. I started working freelance on the internet, doing like content creation, community management, and I was using these platforms like Upwork, like Freelancer, which paid the work with PayPal, which was a very inefficient thing, because first of all, getting a PayPal account in Venezuela was pretty much impossible. It was very hard because you need an international credit card to activate the PayPal account, which was unavailable in Venezuela because of the currency control and capital controls restrictions. So basically, I purchased an activated PayPal account on the internet. I started working freelance on the internet full time, and I was getting paid with PayPal. But the problem with that is that the exchange rate for PayPal dollars to the Venezuelan bolivar, which is the currency of my country, of my home country, was really bad, compared to what you could get if you sell Bitcoin into Venezuelan bolivars. There was a pretty nice Bitcoin exchange in Venezuela back then. So basically, Bitcoin was the solution to my problems, because if I could get paid with Bitcoin, um, my my situation will improve dramatically. So that's what I started looking to. I started working for a couple of Bitcoin news websites, like the Miracle, Cointelegraph, etc. And I was working that full time, wasn't getting a nice income, and that's when I started to realize that the real benefits of Bitcoin as a currency, as a payment method, as everything. And that's pretty much my story back then. In 2016, I started working full time for Purse. Purse is a company that I work for right now. Still, I work for Purse. I work there as a manager of the customer support department. We run a remote team of 6 individuals in the support team. Everyone is paid with Bitcoin. Everyone is remote in different countries. So working as a manager, I grew up into the role with Bitcoin in mind. Everything has circled around Bitcoin in my life for the past years, and I think that's a nice experience to have. I'm very lucky to have found a job where I could get paid with Bitcoin directly.
I'd love to touch on the exchange rate point you mentioned earlier, because I think this might be a common misconception amongst people in like the Western world when they see some news article saying, "Oh, look, people are paying $30,000 for a Bitcoin in Iran," and really that's not right. What it is, or it sort of is right, but really it's a reflection of the official fiat currency rate being less. Oh, sorry, yeah, being giving you less than the actual black market kind of true price for that fiat money. So in this example, it's that the government in Venezuela is giving you a bad exchange rate on Venezuelan bolivars to US dollars, for example. Could you outline a little bit on that exchange rate difference and what drives that?
Yeah, definitely. It's like you're saying, the regimes and governments that apply this harsh economic measure that really doesn't benefit anyone. When they do this, when they restrict your ability to purchase the any currency that you want, all sorts of shenanigans start to popping up in the economy. First, in the microeconomy, the day-to-day economy of people, and then that results in really bad macroeconomic problems. In Venezuela, the currency control restriction was put in place in 2002. Um, During that year, people could still access the dollar, but it was that involved a very complicated financial transactions financial transaction where you will have to purchase a stock that was quoted in bolivars, and then you bought the stock and you sell the stock quoted in dollars. So that way you could like use the stock to purchase dollars, um, essentially bypassing the currency control restriction. That was our thing back in 2002, 2003. But then the government shut that down completely. So pretty much the forex market was closed down to Venezuelans. When governments do that, you start to see black markets arise because that's inevitable. If you restrict the ability for people to purchase something, they will purchase anyway, just with a black market. And the thing about black markets is that they're not transparent; they're opaque. And when when the black market arises, you see all sorts of different quotes or different prices. Traditionally, people in Venezuela have the majority of the economic activity regarding currency exchange happen in the border between Venezuela and Colombia. That's where pretty much that will be the economic center of this activity. The exchange rate in Venezuela fluctuated significantly during the first years of the currency restriction. But things really started to kick in and worsen significantly in 2016, because that's when the hyperinflation started to kick in. And so basically, what used to happen in Venezuela pre 2016 was that the country had inflation, but the currency devaluation was higher than inflation. So essentially, the country was getting cheaper for people with access to dollars, right? Because prices were not going up as fast as the exchange rate was going up. So that was a thing back in 2016. Essentially, if you were getting paid with dollars, you were king because your expenses in the country were very low. But when the hyperinflation started to kick in, the that correlation inverse, and what happened was that the country was becoming increasingly expensive, more expensive for everyone, regardless if you had dollars or bolivars. Of course, if you had dollars, the country was you still maintain some sort of purchasing power, right? But for the people with the national currency, pretty much their saving got destroyed. Like my mom, she worked at public jobs. She as a nurse for something like 50 years, and when she got her retirement check, um, she got for those 50 years of work, she received like less than $5 for 50 years of work. So it's basically the social security system. It completely collapsed because the currency just it wasn't worth anything. So after 2016, everyone got impacted by the economic reality of Venezuela, even people that were getting paid with dollars.
Yeah, that must be incredibly difficult. So you're living in Argentina now. Were there a lot of people who wanted to leave and work in other countries and send money back home?
Yeah, so I came to Argentina in 2018. I moved here with some of my workers, the PERS team, support team. The company actually sponsored some of our flight tickets, which was pretty cool. And we moved here to Argentina in search of a better future. We found a country that is obviously the economy is much better than Venezuela, but it still has some issues like people here. The governments here have applied some of the same tactics like currency control and capital controls to avoid people from purchasing dollars because here the people in Argentina have experienced great economic catastrophes over the years. It is one of the countries that have defaulted the most in history, and people here are obsessed with the US dollar because they know that their own currency isn't worth much, and governments governments here usually they like to spend more money than they can afford, which causes inflation and currency devaluation. So basically what we found here was a country similar to Venezuela in how they run things in the matters of economics, but the population is much better prepared than in Venezuela. Like people here, they are very smart when it comes to micromanaging their finances, and they know that they cannot trust their own currency, and so people are very intelligent about managing their network and their life savings. People got very hit very bad in 2002 and 2001, sorry, because the government at the time, they basically, if you had dollars in your bank account, they pretty much sold those dollars or took away the dollars that you have in your savings account, and they gave you pesos, which is a national currency, at a super bad exchange rate, essentially taking away most of your wealth. So that's why that action, it sent waves across the nation, across everyone's mindset when it comes to the government and when it comes to their money. people realize that they cannot trust the government, they cannot trust the banks, and so this country has a very big mindset when it comes to cash. They like to use cash, not only because they avoid using banks, but also because they also avoid taxes by paying with cash. And so we found a very interesting country, that has all sorts of rituals and customs when it comes to money.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. I'd love to now jump more into the Venezuela Colombian border aspect. So you were saying that there's a lot of interesting things going on there in terms of Bitcoin trading. Can you give us some insight into that?
Yes. So I think it's not only across the Venezuelan and Colombian border, but more across Latin America. But like the saying that all roads lead to Rome, in Latin America, all roads lead to Venezuela. The diaspora, the number of immigrants that left Venezuela is just so high. There are a few examples like this in history. You could compare it to the Syrian migration crisis, but in Latin America, nothing like this has ever occurred in history. Approximately 5 million Venezuelans have left the country. Um, there are 200,000 Venezuelans in the US, a good chunk of them in Miami, in Doral, city of Doral in Miami. And you have more than 1 million Venezuelans in Colombia. You have, more than 2 million Venezuelans in Colombia, probably more. And you have 1 million Venezuelans in Peru, and you have 200,000 Venezuelans here in Argentina. So and also in Ecuador, there's a good chunk of Venezuelans there. So basically, you have all these Venezuelan immigrants all across Latin America. They have family back in Venezuela, and their families. The minimum wage in Venezuela right now is $3 per month. Like that's what you get, $3 per month of work, which is insane. And prices in Venezuela, it's not like you earn $3 and everything costs like a cent of a dollar. No, that's not the case. You get paid $3 per month of work, and everything costs the same as in the U.S. because the industrial production in Venezuela is inexistent. It doesn't exist, and everything is imported, and they usually import it from the U.S. Um, things like the U.S., the Turkey, and all other places. Um, and so all these families in Venezuela, they have high expenses and low income. They have to depend on the people that left the country, on their sons, their grandchildren, their brothers who left the country in search of better hopes. So basically, now you have all these people across Latin America, and they have a need to send money to Venezuela. Obviously, a ton of businesses and opportunities for this use case arise. Typically, people will have a person that they trust to send money to the country, and that has become a big business opportunity. So what I specifically meant in my tweet about this use case between Colombia and Venezuela is that there's uh, there's a problem that the exchange rate in Venezuela is essentially opaque. The exchange rate between the dollar and the Venezuelan bolivar, because it's a black market and everyone has a different price, a different quote. So there are inefficiencies when it comes to selling dollars to purchase bolivars. Everyone will give you a different price. So people in Venezuela have started to turn to Bitcoin as a source of truth when it comes to the exchange rate. So if you go to local Bitcoins, Venezuela, so local Bitcoin is actually the main way, right? Also in Colombia, local Bitcoin has a huge trading volume there. And usually, what people will do is you have all these individuals in the Venezuelan Colombian border that do their business is the exchange between currencies, between Colombian pesos and Venezuelan bolivars. So many of those, many people are doing this. What they do is they they purchase your bolivars, or sorry, they purchase your pesos to send money to your family in Venezuela, Venezuelan bolivars. So what they do is they use local Bitcoin as essentially as the backend for that trade. So they will take the pesos to a person in Colombia, and then they will initiate a local Bitcoin trade to send money to the person in Venezuela. And since local Bitcoin usually has the best exchange rate, people are pretty much arbitraging that exchange rate because peer-to-peer trading is big in the Colombian Venezuelan border, and there are a ton of different prices, different quotes. So there's big opportunity to arbitrage the different exchange rates to take advantage of the fact that local Bitcoin system the biggest trading volume, and that's where the best exchange rate is. So it's a very interesting thing though what is happening there, and it's not only in the Colombian Venezuelan border; it's also happening all across Latin America. Because if you want to send money to your family relatives in Venezuela, you usually have to go through someone who you have to trust, and um, that someone obviously has a process to send money to Venezuela to fulfill the trade, and usually they will find the best exchange rate through local Bitcoin. So pretty much my point here is that local Bitcoin is being used as a backend for exchange or for sending money to Venezuela. It's super crazy. It's super weird, but it's what's happening. There's this guy. His name is Matt, I think. Um,
Matt Alborg,
yeah,
Useful Tulips, right?
yeah, exactly. Useful tulips. He did a research, a very interesting research, on the local Bitcoin Venezuela story here, and he found out that there was a big blackout in Venezuela last year. That blackout left the country pretty much in a halt for like 2 days, 3 days. And what he found was that when that blackout hit, the local Bitcoin trading volume not only increased in Venezuela, but all across Latin America and also in Spain, which indicates to some degree that there's most of the local Bitcoin trading volume that is happening across America is directed or is influenced by Venezuela. And I think that the most obvious explanation is that 5 million Venezuelans left the country. So that they're all across these countries, they have the need to send money to Venezuela. So I think that's the most obvious explanation. It's crazy
Yeah.
that this platform is being used for basically as a settlement layer, if you will, for trading activity back from or to Venezuela.
Got it. So let me just walk that through in my head just to make sure I've understood you correctly. So the diaspora of Venezuelans around, elsewhere in South America and some in Spain, they are basically wanting to send money back home to their family in Venezuela. But the problem is they can't directly send the Bitcoin, or they can, but their family might not be able to directly spend it. And so what you're saying is they typically will use local Bitcoin to buy some Bitcoin, send it to a intermediate person, and they may be, say, on the Venezuelan and Colombian border, and they will do that trade from Bitcoin back to the Venezuelan currency, and then be able to give it to the family. Have I understood you correctly there, or can you just walk through the flow?
Yeah, that's pretty much the process. So it really varies between persons. So in my use case, in my own personal experience, I know what Bitcoin is. I know what local Bitcoin is. I know how to use a platform. I go to I traditionally what I do is I log into local Bitcoin. I initiate a trade with someone on the Venezuelan Bolivar BTC pair in the Venezuelan market. I initiate a trade with someone that has the same bank account that I want to transfer my money to. I initiate a trade with that person, and I tell the person, "Hey, I need a bank transfer for 1 million Venezuelan bolivars to this bank account, which can be my mom's bank account or my own bank account." Um, and that person will fulfill the trade. They will send proof that he did the trade. I can log into my bank account to check, or my mom's bank account to see if the money arrived, and I release the escrow. I release the Bitcoin to that person. That's my flow. That's my procedure because I know how to use it. But the thing about local Bitcoin is not so easy to use. It can be scary. Their interface is not very UX friendly or usable for normal people. So that's when the traders, that's when the intermediaries, that's when other companies are taking advantage of this. That local Bitcoin has the best rates, but not everyone can use it because not everyone has Bitcoin, or not everyone knows how to navigate around the platform. So they will fulfill the trade. They have the Bitcoin, and they will sell the Bitcoin in the platform, and they will charge in cash. If you don't know how to use the platform. So my point is that the local Bitcoin platform is being used as basically as a, I don't know, transfer as a service or bank transfer as a service. That's pretty much what I'm getting to. So I think there's definitely a big potential for people and companies to build businesses on top of this, or build use cases or and whatnot on top of this. Um, and so I think that's the biggest story that is unfolding right now. Um, 1 year, 2 years ago, the Bitcoin volume in local Bitcoin Venezuela was obviously during the bubble 2016, December 2016. That's when we saw obviously the biggest trading volumes, right? But the trading volume has started to pick up pace again. It's slowly going up, and it's very steady. And we have heard reports that the the platform, the local Bitcoin platform, is also being used more and more by businesses in Venezuela, because um, they need to get money out of the country or back to their bank accounts in the U.S. The economy, the Venezuelan economy, has dollarized completely. My mom, who never touched a dollar bill, she's now charging dollars for. She does some artisan work. She paints. She does all these sorts of different things. So she sells her work, and she gets paid with dollars in cash. And she now can go to a supermarket in Venezuela, in my home city, in my hometown, and she can spend dollars effortlessly, and everyone will accept it, which was unthinkable maybe 2 years ago, because legally speaking, it was a crime to sell things in dollars. Everyone did it, but it was technically illegal, and now everyone is doing it. The economy has dollars completely. The dollar is being used by everybody. You will see kids going to a more brick and mortar shop, or the mom and pop store, in their homes, in the corner of the street, and they will pay the store owner with dollars, which is crazy, right? The economy has switched completely to bolivars.
Yeah, that's really interesting insights. And I'm curious, do you see or hear of any direct Bitcoin commerce, like people just directly charging Bitcoin for things? Or is it that people, like, I understand most people would still want to use US dollar in that case?
So we I have heard reports. It's actually public news. It's not a secret. There's a big supermarket chain in Venezuela that started to accept cryptocurrencies. It's a store called Traki. they decided to accept Bitcoin, other altcoins like Dash and whatnot. Um, there have been efforts by the company and people running Dash to market Venezuela as the main use case for their currency. But I think that I don't think they're being honest with their um, with their marketing materials and promotions, because the country in itself is not using. I mean, they're using the fact that many people or many stores are accepting Dash as a sign of growth. But eventually, if you go to the actual place and you try to pay with Dash, or even sometimes with Bitcoin, the retail seller or the person, the cashier, she or he doesn't know what you're talking about. It's the owner who has the knowledge about these cryptocurrencies and will uh, charge you and take your crypto, but the owner usually doesn't is not in the place. So I think that they were very dishonest with their whole promotional thing about Venezuela. I think Bitcoin as in itself and all other cryptocurrencies, um, they're not actively being used for payments in Venezuela. Like, people are not going to their stores and the supermarkets and they're paying with crypto. That's not happening. Maybe if a big store like Traki, the main one that I was talking about, maybe they receive a Bitcoin payment once per week. I don't know. I don't think that's something that is being um, that's reaching a point of mainstream usage. I don't think that's the case. I think the bigger story and the biggest use case is sending money in outside the country, um, and the whole remittance business, the whole forex trading activity that's happening in the Venezuelan Colombian border. I think that's the main story here, and I think the whole payments and businesses taking crypto directly. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that people are paying with crypto in Venezuela.
Got it. And the other question I had was around stablecoins, because if the economy is dollarizing, someone might say, well, why not use stablecoins?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting use case. People are, especially here across Latin America, it's easier to market or to sell a stablecoin to people, instead of selling them at cryptocurrency. I think here in Argentina, I think that's the biggest. It could be the biggest market for a stable coin. There are some attempts. There are some startups here that are working on that. There are a couple of Argentinians who work for the Maker team, right? And they're big promoters of DAI. You have there's a startup company called Cello. Cello is they're building a stable coin. They have a headquarters here in Argentina. I think there's potential for it. But the problem is it's still the same barrier of entry, the long learning curve, because the stablecoin is just it's just pretty much the same thing as a cryptocurrency. So that you still have the complications of teaching people how to use it. And again, here people here in Argentina, and I think you could say that all across Latin America, they don't trust having dollars in the bank accounts. They want to have the thing in the cash, the bills in their hands. So I think beating that cultural that cultural rule, or that sort of um, on that mindset of people wishing to have the physical cash, it's very hard. Is a very hard problem to crack. um, I think, if anything, um, the biggest selling point that you could use to attract people to the stablecoin thing is with DeFi, with the compound, the interest rates that you can get by lending your stablecoins. if you tell people, hey, there's this digital dollar and you can keep your money outside the banking system and outside the hands of the government, I think that's a compelling point. But if you tell them that on top of that they can get, I don't know, 4.5% annual interest rates on their deposits if they keep the money in a decentralized lending pool like Compound or any other, I think that's like a more
More compelling case, right?
a more compelling case. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's hard to market. It's hard to explain people what that is. It's very hard to explain the risks. So eventually, I think the potential here is if you want to sell stablecoin, you have to also sell the lending and annual interest rate so you can get with a stablecoin. I think that's the biggest, the best thing that you can do. Yeah.
Yeah. One other point I was keen to ask you about around the border trade aspect of it. Are these in-person, cash trades, or are these more like bank transfer? I think you talked through a bank transfer example, and then the question is, is the government clamping down on that? Are police stopping it, or does the government otherwise care that people are using it?
So the majority of the volume, the transactions, they take place via bank transfers, the banking system. The government has made attempts to clamp down on people's bank accounts. There during the last 2 to 3 years, they have increasingly blocked more and more bank accounts. People have had to go to the bank branch and explain to the manager why there's so much money entering or exiting their bank accounts. Usually, my dad actually, he had that experience. His bank account was limited. It was rate limited. If you tried to send him a bank account transfer over a certain amount, and the limit was very low, mind you, the transfer would just simply bounce back. So he had to go to the bank branch and explain, my son, he's living abroad. I live all on my own. I do not work. He needs to send me money, and so basically, he made a dramatic explanation to the branch manager to lift the lifted limitation out of the account. He did that, but many people don't have are not that lucky. So the government has tried to clamp down on bank accounts. The problem is that the it's like an arms race. Many of the exchange houses and remittance businesses and money traders in the border and all across Latin America, what they're doing is that they are renting bank accounts in Venezuela. So for 40, anywhere between 40 to 150 $150 per month, you can get a Venezuelan bank account. You can rent a Venezuelan bank account from someone else, and use it to do your bank transfers. And typically the business bank accounts, they're more desirable because they have bigger transfer limits, right? So these businesses in the Venezuela Colombian border, they're using rented bank accounts to do their business. And I think the normal population has had to get smart about this. Like they're spreading out the bank transfer. So instead of getting one big amount per month from their family relatives outside Venezuela, they're sending several wires across the month. It also makes sense because of the inflation, right? If you send money to Venezuela at the beginning of the month, by the end of the month, you will have lost maybe about 50% of your value. So it doesn't make sense to send one big chunk of money. I usually, on my own personal experience, I send money to my mom once a week, sometimes bi-weekly. And my girlfriend, she sends money to her I'm in Venezuela once per week, sometimes twice per week, to work around the inflation and currency devaluation. So I think there are tactics to get around this. Now, regarding the cash trades, peer-to-peer cash trading in the Venezuelan Colombian border, it's uh, it's a risky business because of the criminality and insecurity that there's in the region. Uh, the border is a very hot zone. Is where there you have paramilitary um, elements there, criminals, also government sponsored paramilitary personnel personnel, but pretty much the border is right now is a bloodline of the country. Many of the imported goods come from the border, and many government officials and many military personnel, they take bribes to let things in or outside the country. So it's not a big problem, because everyone's getting their cut. The government officials and military personnel, they're getting their cut. They take bribes in the border to allow money in outside the country. There's big chunks of cash. um, there are many parts of the border where there's smuggling going on. So the government has taken a very lax approach to solve or tackle this problem. They usually they permit it, they allow it. But the thing is that since they allow it, and the military is in this business, um, there is also wars to allow certain smuggling to go on. There are many interests across this chessboard, and so the board is a very dangerous place to be right now. There's also this interesting case that there are many people living in the Venezuelan side of the border, and they go to work to Colombia. Obviously, this is not unusual, right? Maybe in the U.S. Mexico border, you see this too. People living in Mexico, but they go to work in the U.S. But in Venezuela, it's it's even bigger because the minimum wage is so low in Venezuela that everyone in the border, that if they're able to, they will work on Colombia because the wages will be bigger.
I'm also curious to know what is the impact of things like the Venezuelan Petro? Has that confused things for people? Do people just treat it like a pass through thing and they don't spend too much time in the Petro, so to speak?
Yeah, it's you touch a very interesting point that I was hoping you to mention. So Petro right now, you could see Petro as a government sponsored cryptocurrency that is really, it isn't a cryptocurrency because it's completely centralized. The Even the blockchain explorer, it doesn't work. It's just a website. There's no other uh, there are no other providers. There's just one website that you can look up for Petro transactions, and that website, if it works 5 hours per day, it's a miracle. Like usually it's down, that website. You cannot consult, you cannot do queries for certain blocks. Sometimes you search for a transaction, it doesn't appear. It's a complete mess. So this so-called cryptocurrency is run by a company that the government contracted. Nobody knows who this company is, what the employees are, who built this cryptocurrency. It's a complete mystery. The only known thing, and that's because is said in the white paper, is that there are several master nodes. Apparently, this is like a Dash clone or something. There are some master nodes, and those master nodes they're all in the same place. They're all controlled by the government, so there's no transparency when it comes to this cryptocurrency. The other thing is that the Petro is traded on a couple of local exchanges, but due to U.S. sanctions, and not only U.S. sanctions, but also the potential risk of running this unknown cryptocurrency in your exchange. This cryptocurrency is not traded in big exchanges like Binance or Bitrex and the usual suspects, if you will. Um, so this crypto is pretty much an attempt by the government to get money, because what they say is that one Petro is worth $60, which is apparently the price of a barrel of oil. And they say that to back this cryptocurrency, they have allocated a certain amount of oil reserves, but the oil reserves are in the ground, right? And Venezuelan oil is extra heavy. It's really hard to process. It's very hard to extract. So basically, they're saying, hey, we have the biggest oil reserves in the world, and we want to monetize that. So it's like my friend Alejandro Machado said. Alejandro Machado is a guy who's working with a project called the Open Monitor Initiative. They're doing research on the different use cases for crypto in Venezuela. And what he said is that the government essentially is running an initial country offering, because the government is trying to monetize. They're trying to monetize resources that they cannot extract. It's very hard to extract that oil. There's not the oil output of the country has declined significantly. In the year 2000, Venezuela was producing 3 million barrels of oil per day, and today they're getting less than 700 barrels of oil, 700,000. So the oil output has decreased significantly. So what's the value, right? Where does the value come from? It isn't worth anything. They're also saying that they're going to monetize the gold reserves and diamond reserves. Venezuela has several strategic minerals reserves. There's still the problem that it's hard to extract. No one will invest in the country. No sane oil industry company will invest to extract oil in Venezuela. So the value proposition isn't there, right? So what the government is doing is that they're trying to force down the petrol onto people. There are many bureau- bureaucratic processes can be paid with petrol. At least that's what they're advertising. So if you want to get a new passport, and by the way, the Venezuelan passport is the most expensive passport in the whole world. It costs $300 to get a new passport, and it's very hard and almost impossible to get, because they're not printing the damn passport. So pretty much you have people stuck all across the world because they cannot move because they don't have Venezuelan passport. So um, so they're trying to force Petro down onto people. Recently, like one less than 1 month ago, they pretty much airdrop half a Petro onto everyone who was registered with Carnet de la Patria. So Carnet de la Patria is like an ID, is like a card, document ID that you have to sign up for, and people will usually give you free money if you have that ID card. It's called the Fatherland's card or the Motherland's card. I don't know what's the exact translation. So the Fatherland's card, you have to get it if you want to get free money. Usually, the government will send monthly bonuses. They're essentially airdropping fiat every month to everybody. With no regard to with no regards of consequence with inflation and the currency devaluation and the relentless money printing that they're doing. So they're giving away free money, and they're trying to do the same with Petro. They recently there are airdrop half a Petro to every Fatherland's car holder, and there were these designated merchants that accepted Petro. So basically, long queues form in these businesses that were accepting Petro, because everyone got a half a Petro for free. So the biggest victims in this with this airdrop were the merchants, because they got paid with the half a Petro, but the government 2 days, or sorry, 5 days after this airdrop event, um, they stopped the platform, the payment platform, and the Petro is pretty much on hold right now. And people cannot sell their petros. So basically, the merchants who receive petros in exchange of goods, they cannot sell the petros into the national currency. So pretty much they got got left with no stock because they sold everything, because everyone, there was an incentive to spend this petro. Um, and the merchants, they don't have stock anymore, and they cannot sell the petro. So this pretty much was a wealth transfer from the merchants and the store owners, to people who got the airdrop of the petrol. Um, I think that first experience was revealing, was a revealing experience for everyone, because uh, I think it's very obvious that it cannot work as a payment system, because if the government is going to be airdropping petrol every now and then, there's this huge demand to spend it, but there's no purchasing demand. No one wants to purchase this thing, and so that inevitably will lead to to the petrol crashing in value, right? And the sad thing is that the government says that the petrol is worth $60, but on the open market, in the couple of Bitcoin, in the couple of crypto exchanges that trade petrol in Venezuela, it's worth approximately 50 to 60% less than the government advertises.
Firstly, it's just that it's not a real exchange rate, right? So it's just like that same problem that the government just gives itself a really nice exchange rate, but the true exchange rate is much less than that. And the merchants have basically been left holding the shitcoin bags, right? Like
Yeah,
they had to,
yeah,
they had to
it's
give goods, and now they're stuck with these bags that they can't even unload, right? So
yeah.
it's a very unfortunate situation. So turning, I guess, back to more Bitcoin and Bitcoin apps and so on. Have you seen any use of Lightning as an example, or things like Phoenix app, Phoenix Wallet?
No, not recently. What I've heard is that there's a company in Colombia called Value. They have this really nice app for people to exchange pesos into Venezuelan bolivars. So you sell your Colombian pesos via the app, and you go to a storefront that will take the cash, and your family relative will receive bolivars in less than an hour. That was a very nice use case, and although for the user is nothing Bitcoin related, because they don't see anything about Bitcoin, but on the back end, the company will use they will use things like Bitcoin, local Bitcoin, and any Bitcoin exchanges to fulfill the trade and to send money to the person in Venezuela. So I think that's a very nice and interesting use case, right? You use Bitcoin on the back end, nobody has to know about it, and it fulfills a purpose. Um, Now, regarding the more Bitcoin centric aspect of things, I haven't heard of any innovations going on in the country regarding Bitcoin. I know that there's more and more interested to purchase Bitcoin, just to protect your network, your wealth, because of the Venezuelan bolivar is just devaluing every day. Um, but apart from that, the innovation is pretty much clamp it down, because the country is such in a turmoil state that there's uh, there's no time left to think about innovation. People, programmers, professionals in the country, the few there, they're still there, because the majority, they just left the country. The few of them they're there, they just work for companies, on the outside. They do freelance work, for companies in the US, for companies in Latin America. They get paid with dollars, and they don't have time to think about solving the situation in the country. Now, there are several wallets that you can use. Of course, I think mobile wallets have real power to penetrate the market. Um, Especially like privacy center wallets like Samurai, They you have a very interesting use case there, because um, having a mobile wallet means that you can pay anybody that you encounter, but also you have to think about the fact that Venezuela is a very insecure place, so your phone can be stolen at any time. Um, and so you have to build products for that. Like with Samurai Wallet, you can do stuff like disable the wallet with via SMS. They have all these privacy features, and they have think about the wallet from the aspect of an adversary, right? And also you have the potential to build stuff that will allow people um, to purchase the currency. I mean, to purchase Bitcoin with the national currency. There's the opportunity to build local exchanges. You have the opportunity to build maybe exchanges that have a better UI than what local Bitcoin has. So I think there's room for innovation. There's room for products, but you have to think from the you have to think the most basic use cases, because you cannot go too far, because the economy is not in such a place to think about advanced use case. People don't have enough money to be messing around with crypto. The fees are high, sure. So you have to think about that. So there are many things that you have to think about when building products. My friend Alejandro, who has been working with the Open Monetary Initiative, they have released research on this and how to build products thinking about Venezuela. They have found out that if you want to build something, you have to think about the low bandwidth that you have. The internet connectivity is really bad, so you have to think about that. You have to think about the fact that that phones, they run on all software. There's all Android phones there, so you have to build lightweight apps that can run on low bandwidth. So there are all these prerequisites. So it leaves very few room for innovation. It's very complicated. I think that the main use case um, that we have to think about is just uh, Bitcoin as a sort of value, and Bitcoin as a way to move money inside or outside the country. I think that's a main use case. I ramble a lot. Sorry about that, but yes, I think it all comes down to getting money in or outside the country.
Yep. And so, presume then we are seeing more people who would like to hodl Bitcoin, right? Like use it more as a longer term savings. Uh, Alongside that, are people considering things like key management, backups, and so on? Is that something that you're hearing advancing in terms of people learning how to use backups and sort of storage, longer term storage?
Not so much. There's plenty of opportunities to think about that. I have heard about someone. There was someone who told me in a conversation back at. I attended DEFCON 4 in Prague. That was in 2018, and I had the chance to speak about the Venezuelan situation with Alejandro, with my friend Alejandro. We did a presentation there, and I want to believe that it made a um, it made a good impact on people that attended the conference. And when I left the when we finished our presentation, a, a ton of people, they approach me and they say, hey, how can we build stuff for this country, what we can do? And there was this guy who presented me with the idea of maybe having like um, physical cards or physical items that hold Bitcoin, right? And that you can give to someone else, that someone else can scan. The item will have, I don't know, like a private key built in, that you can sweep. And scratchable cards was also a discussion that was brought up in that presentation. So because that's somewhat that people are used to, right? People are used to exchange physical things. They're used to money, on a day-to-day basis. Is a physical thing. It's bills that you touch, that you give to someone else. So I think there can be an opportunity to convert crypto in a physical thing. um, I think that's a nice use case. In terms of in terms of key management, that's a very advanced topic. I don't think uh, we have to uh, we have to think very deep about these issues. People, normal people, they get scared when they say a Bitcoin transaction. I still get sometimes I'm still a little bit scared when I send a Bitcoin transaction. Right? It's something you feel in your guts when you move a large portion of your wealth from one address to other address. When you send money to someone to pay for something, and it's a big payment, you still get some tingling sensation in your guts when you send that transaction. When we reach a point where we don't feel that tingling sensation in our stomachs, I think that's the point um, where we can feel at ease, right? When we have built things, products, and services that will allow us to make Bitcoin payments or crypto payments, without that awful nagging feeling that you can lose everything if you type something wrong. It's very hard to achieve. It's very hard to get to a point like that. Um, for normal people's for normal people, sorry, they don't it's very hard for them to grasp the concept that um, everything is all that they have is in a 12 is in a series of 12 words, and if they've lost those words, all their money is gone. I think that's it's a very hard problem to solve. I don't think there if you want the absolute privacy, if you want to be in control of your wealth, it's inevitable. Um, you have to think about storing your money. You have to think about securing your own private keys. You have to think about all of that. So we build things to allow normal people to use crypto, but that will also sort of like corrupt the principles of Bitcoin, the principles of self custody. Or we teach everyone to be a self custodian. We teach everybody about the importance of storing their own Bitcoin. We teach everyone to be basically a libertarian. We have to teach. So that's pretty much it. You have to convince people to. Um, you have to convince people to take up the responsibility of securing their own wealth, to securing their own money, and I think we have to focus more on that, because we have a couple of good solutions right now for like wallets. Um, you have big companies like Coinbase. Coinbase is a company that has received a lot of critics across the years. Ever since I joined the space in 2012, everyone was always complaining about Coinbase. Um, it's Coinbase is pretty much an enemy of every um, Bitcoin maximalist or people that is very focused on the self custody, because they're this big U.S. corporation, big company. They're growing. Eventually, they will become well, they're already, I believe, a multi-billion-dollar company. But it will get to the point that they're too big to fail, and they will get to a point that will concentrate the majority of Bitcoin in circulation. Um, and so that company Coinbase, they have simplified a lot of things for people, right? And if you get too comfy, and they go bust, and you will lose everything. So but they have done a good job in terms of UX, in terms of ease of use, and in terms of if you want to purchase Bitcoin, if you want to introduce Bitcoin to somebody in the US, the easiest solution for them to purchase the coin, the Bitcoin is through Coinbase, among other. Of course, you have other providers. Um, so I think that's problem number one, right? Who do we trust? Do I trust myself, or do I trust someone else to hold my coins? Of course, the preferred solution is to trust myself and do my own custody. But if I'm not careful, I can lose everything. And the second problem is how to get Bitcoin, how to purchase cryptocurrency. Um, I think I, I've been in this space for a long time, and in the span of 7 years, not much has changed in terms of fiat on ramps. If you want to purchase crypto, it's still the same companies. It's still Kraken. It's still Coinbase. It's still Bitstamp running the show. Um, and then you have the casinos, Binance, the BitMEX. They're essentially casinos because they allow trading with just signing up with an email password combination. They don't have KYC. I mean, they have KYC up to a certain point, at least Binance. Um, but they're just casinos because they don't have fiat on ramps. Because if they have fiat on ramps, then they have to be regulated. So I think that's a problem. The on ramps. If you want to purchase crypto in Latin America, you have to go. You have you have two main ways. If you are a newbie, you're a rookie in this space, you will have to go through a local exchange. Um, that is the most trusted in your own country. Here in Argentina, you have Ripio, you have Crypto Market, you have Satoshi Tango, you have different exchanges, but the quotes and the prices that they give you are very bad. So if you want the best rate, you have to go OTC with local Bitcoin. Local Bitcoin usually has the best rate. Um, and so but then you have to deal with the uncertainty that that there's a counterparty on local Bitcoin. If you're a newbie, the UX can be very scary. So there are limited opportunities. Um, there are limited fiat on ramps, and the fiat on ramps that exist and that people can trust are very they have very bad prices. So it's going to be expensive to purchase crypto. So that's for me. That's one of the most important problems to solve, the on ramps. And of course, you have the long term problem of fungibility, which is a topic that I think will be big in the coming years. It's still something that many people don't pay attention to. I mean, the regular users, for them, a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, but for other people that they think about the long term, they think about the what's happening right now with law enforcement, with the subpoenas that are going on in this space with the companies in the crypto industry. When they think about the darknet markets and how they Bitcoins that come from hacks, the Bitcoin that come from drug dealing, those Bitcoin are worth less than the Bitcoin, than clean Bitcoin, if you will, the clean coins. So you have products like Wasabi, which is a really nice wallet that I'm using that allows you to mix your coin, to do Bitcoin mixing. And so I think this year we can really think about that. There are innovation in the roadmap. Maybe in the next couple of years, it will take 2 to 5 years for Bitcoin to incorporate um, technology and features that will make mixing coins more easier, more cheaper. Um, so the idea is to get to a point where one Bitcoin, one output is worth the same as any other output, and I think that's a big value proposition, because a dollar is a dollar, and you have $2 bills, and it doesn't matter where they came from. It doesn't matter if $100 bill came from a murderer, than $100 bill that came from a farmer that they got their paycheck, and or they got paid in cash. It doesn't matter what that $100 came from. We want to get to that point. um, Even if some people think it's immoral, I think fungibility is the biggest next problem for Bitcoin that needs urgent solving.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few points I can sort of extract from there. So, in terms of building products that work for, let's say, Venezuelans, it part of the challenges, if you will, are firstly, I guess the cost. So the cost of having a hardware wallet, and then even the cost of having like a more recent Android phone that can have the right the wallets that run all these different features and so on. So there are a few of the I guess things to think about. From a more Argentinian perspective, do you see day to day, Bitcoin spending, Lightning spending? Is it more used in certain cafes or things like that?
There are a couple of places that accept Bitcoin. You have Bitcoin ATMs. My first experience with a Bitcoin ATM was here in Argentina. It was something that blew my mind, that I was exchanging Bitcoin into physical cash. It was an experience that I don't know. It's one of those first experiences that you cannot replicate. Um, that's that when I did that exchange and I used that ATM, I thought, wow, how far have we come? There are places that accept Bitcoin here in Argentina, sure, but they're very niche. If you go to Microcentro is downtown Buenos Aires, is where the big office space buildings are, where the main there's a lot of trading activity, trading desks, and basically big business is in that place. But then you have also there are individuals called cambistas, and they have cuevas. So cambistas are people that exchange dollars, that exchange pesos into dollars and dollars into pesos, the national currency. And cuevas is is basically a dark office where you go to sell your dollars, or you go with your pesos to purchase dollars outside the banking system, which is technically illegal, but it's allowed. So all these people down there, that you can see physical stores that say, hey, we accept Bitcoin, and you can see that Bitcoin accept the here payment. But in my experience, when I went to those places, they haven't still downloaded a Lightning app, and we usually we do normal Bitcoin transactions with normal wallets. So I don't think I think it's still very early um, for the majority of Bitcoiners to catch up with Lightning. There are some innovation taking place here in Argentina. You have people, um, most of the people are rootstock. They are building their own side chain and whatnot. They're here from Argentina. I think they recently moved to Uruguay. They have an office there, but they're from Argentina. You have a dedicated Bitcoin space, which is called Bitcoin Space. Um, it's basically an office building with many startups. Some focus around Ethereum, some focus around Bitcoin. There's monthly meetups. There's a lot of community building effort taking place in Argentina. There's the developers of the Moon Wallet, which has Lightning enabled, I think. And so I think there's innovation taking place, but it's still too early. Um, it's still very very small as of now. We haven't catch up with Lightning usage yet. I haven't seen anybody using it as of now. But there's potential. There are very smart people working on that here, and I think we'll get to that point.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, there's a lot of good tools and things being built out. So I guess that's pretty much most of the questions I had. Did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on before we finish up?
I think we cover everything. I think my final thoughts on this will be the technology. The technology is in a very good place for people to use it as it is. We have many people using Bitcoin for everything. I myself, I use it. If I can live off Bitcoin entirely, um, I think many other people can do it too. And I think the technology as it is good enough to serve a purpose. I can buy flight tickets with Bitcoin. I can buy gift cards with Bitcoin. I work for a company that allows people to use Bitcoin for Amazon purchases. Um, we have decent Bitcoin exchanges. I think that there's we came a long way. Definitely, we came a long way, but we still need to solve very basic fundamental problems to allow normal people to use the technology. I think we will get there. It's going to take some more years of work, but we will. And there's still the question: um, we will see a big government actively trying to stop this technology. Um, will the economic uncertainties and geopolitical uncertainties that surround our world today uh, drastically affect Bitcoin? I think we will. I think when you see a president um, actively sending not threats but implicit threats to the head of the Federal Reserve to print more money, I think those are wake up calls. Those are wake up calls. I come from a country that destroyed their own national currency in an effort to um, essentially um, um, essentially maintain power and maintain control of the country for as long as they could. They achieved so. They destroyed the currency. They printed money relentlessly, and they're still in power. In Argentina, the same. The governments are putting currency control exchanges. Um, our ability to find economic freedom is being restricted. So we have to think about that in the long term. We have to think about our rights as citizens in our respective countries to access any currency that we want, to dispose of our money as we want. Um, Governments in Europe are banning cash. They're clamping down on cash because they know that that's a risk. That's a risk because people can do with cash whatever they want. They want to pretty much restrict every sort of venue for people to avoid taxes, and in that process they're destroying our economic freedoms or economic rights. So I think that's something to think about in the future. I think that's something to think about. No matter what country are you in, no matter if you're in Venezuela, third world country, no matter if you're in Spain, no matter if you're in Finland or Sweden or in the US, populist governments are popping up. Cash is being this is on a dead list. So watch out, everyone. Buy Bitcoin. I think those are my closing thoughts.
Excellent. And lastly, just where can we find you online?
So you can find me online on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Kodiox. That's where I hang out the most. I usually share updates about what's happening in Venezuela, what's happening in Argentina, um, and you can also, if you use Purse or product, feel free to reach me out. I'm the support manager there, and yeah, I hope that crypto becomes more useful. That's pretty much our motto in the company that we work for. We want to enable people to spend Bitcoin and actively use Bitcoin, and you can live off Bitcoin right now. I think we need to encourage that more. We need people to use Bitcoin for their day-to-day lives. That way we can increase the usage of this beautiful technology.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Eduardo.
Oh, thank you so much for this interview. I hope the listeners had a blast and had a good time listening to my ramblings and babbling.
Just a quick announcement, as Peter McCormack can no longer make Advancing Bitcoin Conference, I'm actually stepping in as the MC. So it's on February 6th and 7th in London. There's some awesome speakers there like Andrew Polstra, Andrew Chow, Jimmy Song, Stepan Snijirev. If you're interested, I think it'll be a fantastic conference. Go to advancingbitcoin.com and use the code Lavera for a discount. Otherwise, as usual, you can subscribe, get the show notes, find the transcript at stefanlavera.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the Citadels.